So welcome to AAM's workshop with Hope Bahonec entitled Greenwashing Our Food, Sustainable Labels Won't Save the Planet. We are seeing a new awareness around the impact agriculture and our food have on not only climate disruption, but land use, biodiversity, deforestation, water use, water pollution, fishing, and our oceans. Most of us have heard that meat is bad for the environment, but is choosing grass-fed, free-range, or local animal products better? Hope will share what she has learned from studying decades of peer-reviewed and scientific research to help you make the best choice for the planet and animals. So my name is Michelle Granberg. I'm your moderator tonight. I'm a mentor and team member with Animal Activism Mentorship. I'm located in New Jersey, and I've been vegan and an activist for 5 years. AAM's mission is to eradicate violence and build a culture of empathy and compassion, which ultimately results in animal liberation. We strive to build a global community of activists through our free online program dedicated to pairing experienced mentors with those who want to increase knowledge, gain experience, and develop confidence in their activism. Additionally, we offer free workshops that train and educate our mentors, mentees, and the public on various aspects of animal rights activism. We're also proud to announce our strategic alliance with one of the oldest animal rights organizations in the world, Farmed Animal Rights Movement, or FARM. If you're interested in becoming a mentor or a mentee or want to get involved, please visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com, and follow both AAM and FARM on social media. Now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. Hope Bahonec has been active in animal protection and environmental activism for 30 years and has published the book, The Ultimate Betrayal, Is There Happy Meat, which I highly recommend. She is the executive director of Compassionate Living and host of Hope for the Animals podcast. She co-founded the Humane Hoax Project, the Ahimsa Living Project, and has organized hundreds of online and in-person events. Over the last 3 decades, Hope has worked for the national nonprofits United Poultry Concerns and In Defense of Animals, and contributed chapters to 2 anthologies. So I'm going to turn it over to Hope. Please hold, we are going to have questions and answers after Hope's presentation, but hold your questions, or you can go ahead and put them in the chat and I will read them and make sure your questions are answered by Hope later on. Okay, go ahead, Hope, take it away.
All right. All right, welcome everybody. So I am going to share my screen. I've got some slides for your focus and amusement. So let's see here. Can everybody see that? Are we good? Yes, wonderful. I got a thumbs up. Okay. So, well, welcome to 2022. We're pretty much into it now. And, you know, this last year, 2021, I think really was, I mean, of course, an accumulation of the last 10 years, but I think there was really, it was finally the wake-up call, I think, that people really needed to see that climate change is here, is now, is affecting us right now in this country, you know, in the US. And there, you know, of course, there's torrential rains and floods and fires and all over the world as well. But in the US, we had, I mean, just last year, these crazy tornadoes in Kentucky. And then soon after that, huge fire in Colorado, all in the winter, when, you know, these kinds of things rarely are, I mean, they're never that big when it's the season, when it's the tornado or fire season. Anyway, it's crazy what's happening if you're looking at all these weather events. And for the first time ever, there was a poll that found that the majority of people in the US now feel that they are directly affected by climate change. That's the first time, you know, after doing that poll for however many years, that now the majority, more than 50%, believe that they are directly affected by climate change. So that's good. Let's wake up to this. And, you know, as a result of this, of course, now journalists, environmentalists, influencers are starting to make that connection between the environmental and, you know, everything, not just climate change, but all the environmental issues and animal agriculture. And, you know, for me, it's like, finally, you know, I've been vegan for 32 years, and I have been doing this activism for about 30 years. And I actually edited a grassroots vegan newspaper back in the day, early 90s. It was called Animal Rights, with a W-R-I-T, Animal Rights. Clever. And that was a print, like just kind of zine kind of thing, if you know what a zine is. But one of the, which is just kind of like a very grassrootsy, activisty newspaper. And one of the first cover like stories that I did, and I did extensive research on it, and I had this big, you know, flashy thing, and it was all about animal agriculture's effect on climate change. Crickets, you know, did anybody care? No. But finally, it took 30 years, more than that, finally, we're starting to wake up to it. Okay, so, you know, I know that this group is kind of already vegan, already activist oriented, so I don't need to really get into a lot of detail about what the issue is. But of course, animal agriculture is impacting climate change, massive energy and fossil fuel consumption, deforestation, habitat loss, biodiversity loss, water pollution, air pollution, you know, soil degradation, wasting of food, wasting of resources, wasting grains, all of that. Okay. So what do we do about it? What can we do? Well, the animal product industry is telling you what you can do. They're saying, hey, we're going to take care of this for you. Why don't you buy sustainable, organic, local? We're going to change. We're changing things. Things are, you know, things are going to change. Okay, well, let's see. Let's take a look at that. Let's break it down. And I'm going to break it down label by label to really dig in and see what's going on with these sustainable labels. And I want to start with local. Okay, local. So I actually took this picture at a Whole Foods in Petaluma. The local label is everywhere, and everyone's definition is different. There's all kinds of different radiuses that can be considered local. But really, when it breaks down to what it comes down to is that when you assess a food's carbon footprint, or how much impact a food has on climate change, transportation, or the, you know, how local your food is factor, is really only 11% of the equation. It's quite low. The production phase, how much energy and resources went into making that product, that's 83% of the equation. So that's more significant. And guess what? Animal products are heavy on production, on resource intensive energy use, all of that. So really we need to back up and say, well, what's most important here? You know, and local, it's not, there's not a whole lot of weight that's carried with this label. Also, when they do life cycle assessments, so that's calculating like the impact of a food from seed to plate with plant foods, and from inception to plate with animal foods. They calculate these things, like how much impact there is. And again, animal products have a higher impact, no matter what the label, no matter how far it traveled. Animal products are just more intensive, energy, resources, all of that. So, and we'll get more into that. And, you know, I'll just say, to kind of talk more about local, buying local doesn't necessarily mean buying ecologically or even more humanely. And I don't know why these things get kind of lumped together and assumed that, you know, it has anything to do with humane. And also the energy and water and fossil fuel needed to produce a product, it's just so much more impactful. That's the factors to look at when you're assessing a food, not how far it traveled. So I'll give an example. Let's say you're at the store and you've got a tomato that came from Mexico. And you're like, oh, wow, that's a lot of food miles. It had to come really far. Organic tomato even, but still, that's just so far. That, I don't know. This organic milk product, organic yogurt, that's local. It's local. It's got to be better, right? That's going to be better than this tomato that came from Mexico. No, not necessarily, and not at all, because every time they assess animal products compared to plant foods, animal products always have a higher carbon footprint, energy output, all of that. Okay, so just to wrap up the local, switching from a plant-based diet. This is a study in the Journal of Environmental Science Technology. It found that switching just 2 meals a week from meat and dairy to a vegetable-based diet achieves more greenhouse gas reduction than buying all locally sourced food. So, again, local doesn't mean a whole lot. Okay, so let's move on to another label. Free range or pasture raised as well. We'll kind of lump them together slightly. I mean, there is a bit of difference, although there's zero regulation, and farms can say whatever they want. So really there isn't any difference because we don't know. Most people assume that when there's a label, again, this lumping, most people assume that when there's a label like free range or pasture raised, that it's more environmental as well as humane. So, both things people think is going on. So we're looking at the environmental aspects here. And the reason that I use this image that you're seeing is because this is a cage-free operation, a cage-free egg operation for these chickens. This could be considered free range. All a farmer would have to do is open a little door to a, concrete patio or a mud yard that maybe 25 of these birds could fit in and call that free range. And it could be open 5 minutes a day. There's no regulation on how long they have the access for. So my point in showing you this picture is that really free range means nothing when it comes to environmental issues and environmental differences between cage-free or a cage operation. There's just nothing different going on here. So it means nothing environmentally. But let's say, that we actually are transitioning to some kind of a truly outdoor access type situation. And there are companies that are doing this, very few. And pork production is a big one as well, letting pigs be in a pastured area. And I'm going to talk more about that a little later but whenever you transition to a truly free range system, the same amount of animals, same amount of animals. Now, okay. I'm going to go back to this picture because I want the visual. So let's imagine that this farmer, this shed is maybe on a 1/4 acre of land, right? So let's say that this farmer wants to transition to some kind of free range, some kind of pasture base, give these birds some kind of outdoor space. Well, he would have to have acres and acres and acres more land to be able to accommodate all of these hens. It just can't be done. So he would have to reduce the amount of animals, therefore reducing the amount of product of eggs, right? So basically we're looking at tons more land, fewer animals, fewer product, fewer, food substances coming out. So really, not even triple the space would be enough for this. I mean, they would need substantially more space. So free range, organic, all of this, it requires way more land for fewer animals. And as the demand for these animal products grow, then we're going to have to start destroying wild spaces and cutting trees and filling wetlands. And, to accommodate local free range animals, we really wanted to feed everybody in the area, we would have to really increase the loss and damage to biodiversity everywhere. So more open space would be required. So I'm going to give you an example. So there is a beef and pork farm in Petaluma. And they claim on their website that they give their animals, so 10 acres of space per cow and 50 acres per 10 pigs, okay? So now we're up to 60 acres of land. That is a huge amount of land for 11 animals. How much meat are they really going to get out of 11 animals? Well, guess what? There are 60,000 people in Petaluma. How on earth is this going to scale up? How are you going to feed 60,000 people in Petaluma local free-range pork when you need that much land? It can't be done. It really can't be done. There's simply not enough space. This local free-range diet is just a niche market for a few elite buyers. It cannot be scaled up. And as I say here, basically we would need closer to 5 planet Earths to accommodate all the farmed animals if we wanted to go free-range and pasture raised. Okay, so we're going to move on to another label, organic. What about organic? Now, organic, actually, of all the labels that we're going to talk about this evening, organic really is the one that does have some oversight, some regulation, some on-site inspection of the farm. None of the others have on-site inspection of the farm. It's just the farmer's word. So this is one of the only ones with some regulation. But the issue is that all it really means, the only difference in organic and a conventional farm is that the feed fed to the animals is organic and that the animals are drug-free. And some species of animals need to have some access to outside. It depends on the species. So there's very little difference and certainly nothing that addresses so many of the issues that are going on. You know, the environmental destructions that I've been talking about all mostly still apply to organic. And one of those reasons is, again, the smaller number of animals, larger amounts of land. But I'm just going to show you this, chart, because I think this really kind of wraps it up instead of me getting into details of the why. Check this out, okay? There's 3 diets here. We've got veganism, vegetarianism, and a diet that includes meat and dairy. That the bottom is the standard American diet. That's what everybody's eating is down at the bottom. The dark green is conventional farming. The light green is organic farming of the bars going across. And of course, how far they're going across is the impact on specifically greenhouse gases, what we're talking about here, and climate change. Okay, so if you look down at the very bottom, and you know, I wish some of this I used to have a pointer, a laser pointer that I would use. I wish I could do that on this, but I can't really, so I have to kind of talk you through it. But the bottom long green line, all right, that's where the majority of people are. And let's say someone says, okay, you know, I'm inspired. I really want to eat more ecologically. I'm going to go all organic. I'm going to eat organic dairy and organic meat. I'm going to buy everything organic. Okay, well, you reduce your impact by 8% and you go up to that long light green line that's right above there. Now, let's say that this same person says, you know, I'm inspired. I want to eat more ecologically. I'm going to go vegan. And now we're not even talking about, you know, organic necessarily, just vegan. All right, now we're talking. Now you reduce your impact by 87% and you jump up to that dark green line at the top under the vegan diet, taking it all the way to organic vegan, and you go to that tiny little light green speck up there and you've reduced your impact by 94%. So once again, like I was talking about with local, the impact is with animals, with animal products, animal agriculture, animal farming. That's where the impact is, not necessarily with the local label, not necessarily with an organic label. Those can help if they're on a plant food, right? But when you're comparing animal products and plant foods, there's just such a huge, vast difference. And the vegan diet wins every time. Okay. So we're going to jump now to grass-fed. And again, you see this label everywhere. I took this picture out of Whole Foods as well. I think this one was in Santa Rosa. And, you know, this is another one that we're seeing all over the place. This one was pretty fascinating because when I looked into this one, I kind of was shocked that what I found is that actually, you know, where all these others are like, yeah, okay, it can be a little better, you know, it's kind of a little better, but going vegan's best. This one, it's worse. It can be worse. And there's studies coming out showing that grass-fed beef can actually produce 50 to 60% more greenhouse gases than conventional beef. It uses more water to raise these cattle, these cows. I don't like to use the word cattle. It's very, I think, degrading. So I try to remember to change and use cows, although cattle is used a lot in the scientific research. So that's how it bleeds in. But anyway, numerous studies from Oxford, Harvard, Washington State University, they've compared conventional feedlot cattle and grass-fed cattle. And again, they find that grass-fed products require more land, more water, more fossil fuels. It's crazy. I mean, why are people buying this label? It's because I just got a weird audio thing happening. Okay, hopefully it was just a glitch. Yeah, why are people buying this? Because they think it's more environmental, and it's really not. Anyway, this is where someone, a foodie, an advocate might say, hang on. You can't just throw the cows out into the field and think everything's going to be okay. There are methods, there are production ways, there are, you know, practices, ways that we have to do it right. Okay, all right, well, I hear you. I hear your critique. Let's look at that. Regenerative grazing. So this is the new buzzword, the new thing that we're going to be hearing a lot about. And you know, I think this is so critical for everyone to try to understand and wrap their brains around. And the hard part of it is that it is a lot of kind of science information and details to really understand and unpack why it's not better. But it's important. So it's so important that we do. Well, okay, first I'll explain what it is. Let's start with that, just so everyone knows what we're talking about here. It has a lot of different names: holistic management, rotational grazing, short duration grazing, all of these names, but they're all kind of filtering into regenerative animal agriculture now. That's kind of what everyone's calling it now. And I use this image here for you to see, get your brain around what's going on. So all those lines that you see, the red and white lines, that's fencing. Okay, so let's say this is an area that a farmer has for his cows, and he's got it fenced in this grid, right? So he uses, first of all, a small number of cows, and that's key, very small number of cows go into one of those areas, right? Okay, so say the cows are in that area, they graze for a while, a few months, whatever. When they've grazed it down, then they will open the fencing area and herd them into the next little section, close it off, and let them graze in the next section. And then the section that they were in, the former section, regenerates, right? That's the idea, is that it will regenerate, and this goes around and goes around. Okay, so there's numerous issues here. And one thing is that, again, like free range, like pasture raised, we're using a very small number of animals for a huge area of land, right? You can't scale it up. Once again, how are we going to feed 8 billion, getting close to now 8 billion people on the planet? It just can't be scaled up. That's, you know, it's just kind of bottom line right there. Okay, but we'll go deeper. There's all this fencing, and that can be very disruptive to wildlife. That's another issue. And this is not something new, actually. They kind of try and sell it as something that's new, but actually there has been a great deal of study done on this, peer-reviewed research for decades done on these farming methods. And unfortunately, there just isn't the science to show that this management system is doing what they say they're doing, that it's sequestering soil, that it's, you know, improving water quality, all these things that they claim. Well, there's study after study after study claiming that no, that's actually not the case. Now, the problem is that there are farms, these regenerative farms that are, you know, getting, I'm going to say paying for, but getting organizations to do studies to show that it's all good, that things are, you know, improving and things are great. Well, again, there's numerous issues with it. This is such it's a complicated issue, and I know our time is limited, so I don't want to get into too much detail. I will give you a couple of resources where it will give you a lot more detail. And one is one of my podcasts. I had Dr. Tushar Mehta on, who we spent an hour of him unpacking this issue. So I encourage you to listen to that podcast. But really, the bottom line is that small number of animals can't be scaled up. And what they're comparing it to, a lot of times there's these comparisons, and they'll compare it to the worst of the worst, the conventional feedlot farming and CAFOs, like confined animal feeding operations, right? Those kinds of comparisons, it makes no sense, because why don't we think about what the best use of the land is for, the best use, the best thing that we could do with this land for climate change is to rewild it, leave it alone, rewild, replant, reforest. And then this land is going to definitely be sequestering carbon, is going to definitely be doing all the things that we want it to do, and improving the groundwater and all those things. You know, just comparing it to the worst of the worst, yeah, it may look better, and not necessarily every time. That's, you know, another factor in the details. But we have to think about what this land could be used for that would be the maximum benefit, and that is rewilding. Let's skip the animal products altogether. And then, of course, we have to think about the animals themselves. I mean, they're pawns in all this. I mean, I can't, it's frustrating to you know, talk about all this and not think of their individual lives. And, you know, but that's not what today's subject is. I will get a little more into humane washing in a minute, but anyway, so again, you know, free ranging, grass-fed, rotational grazing, all these things, it's something people really want it to be true. They want to be able to eat their meat and feel like they're helping, that they're doing you know, things are improving. But unfortunately, it just doesn't hold water scientifically. So okay. I promised earlier that I was going to talk a little more about pasture-raised pigs and pork. So I do want to talk about this a little bit, and this really is more the humane hoax. And I'm going to be giving an entire other presentation in February to the same group on humane washing. So I usually put this in the humane washing, but I feel like, you know, this is where my heart is, and I have to talk about the animals briefly. So I'm gonna. Okay. Okay. So there was this study that was done in 2020, just recently put out in 2020, and it was called the Animal Welfare and Production Challenges Associated with Pastured Pig Systems. And it's actually a meta-analysis, which means that it's not just one study. They look at numerous studies and come to a conclusion, okay? So this is very good science when it's a meta-analysis. And they looked at articles and studies between 2000 and 2020, so 20 years of articles and studies on free-range and organic pork production, okay? And what they found, it underscores the myriad of problems with taking animals out of the barns and putting them onto pasture. There's this myth, this romanticized myth, that if we just get all the animals out of the barns and out of the confinement buildings and put them out on the pasture. Everything will be fine. These are domestic animals. These are not wild animals, and they need care. They need management. They need us, you know, and they get thrown out there and all kinds of terrible things happen. Like, you know, they, let's see. Okay, exposure to extreme temperatures, heat stress, not being able to get adequate shade. So if they were really free ranging and could actually, you know, go for acres and acres, you know, they would find trees and divots in the land to block wind, and, you know, they'd know where to go to get out of extreme weather. But if they're limited to, and, you know, 2, 3, 4 acres of just flat field, their opportunities are limited to get out of extreme weather. So extreme temperatures, heat stress, lighter skinned animals can get painful sunburn and blistering. And then of course, extreme cold in the winter, frostbite, piglets dying of hypothermia and pneumonia. Contact with wildlife and pathogens is much more prevalent, of course, especially parasites. And also predators. They're way more exposed to predators, and there's predation of the piglets. So, you know, there's a lot of issues when they don't have adequate ways of escaping dangers. And pastured pigs and the pork has really a much higher risk of salmonella and campylobacter, and really a whole host of other things that I can't pronounce and you do not want in your food. And you know, there's more complexity in the monitoring of sick animals and seeing who is sick, because, you know, they're not keeping as close an eye on them. So there's just so many issues going on. And this paper only covered farm welfare. It didn't talk about transportation and slaughter. So there's a whole nother, you know, horror that happens to these animals. Anyway, I just wanted to, I think it's a really fascinating study that should be out more. I wish people were talking more about it. Okay, so I'm going to move on to something else that I really feel is incredibly important to talk about. And that is that, especially with an environmental audience, when you're speaking or, you know, talking to an environmental audience, the main message that they're getting is that it's beef. It's beef's the problem, beef's bad, beef's bad. So, you know, I really want to emphasize that comparing beef and dairy to chicken, meat, and eggs, it's like comparing rotten apples and oranges. Okay, yeah, sure, beef may be a little better with climate change, but chicken, meat, and eggs can be way worse with other things, pollution of water being one of them. So, you know, it's a bad comparison. And once again, like with rotational grazing, how about comparing it to a vegan diet? Because guess what? Then you're really making a difference. Then you're really reducing your impact. But I do want to get into just a little bit about chicken's impact, because we don't talk about it enough. When it comes to environmental, everybody thinks, oh, chicken, it's the best, right? No, not at all. So one of the reasons is the poultry litter. So these pictures are of a broiler chicken house, which is the chickens that are bred and killed for their meat. This also could apply to cage-free and the breeder houses. This actually could be a breeding house as well, with the breeder chickens. So just a big floor confinement, thousands and thousands of birds, probably tens of thousands of birds in this building. And they put down this poultry litter. It's like shavings, wood shavings, and other materials. And it starts getting built up with this toxic yuck, right? I mean, it's got high concentrations of feces, heavy metals, the diseased dead carcasses of birds that just died, chemicals, bacteria, parasites, pathogens, viruses. I mean, it's gross. It's awful. And they just, you know, dump truck all this stuff or push all this stuff, push it out onto the farm somewhere. and it goes down into the groundwater and pollutes whatever waterways are near. And when you have a high concentration of nutrients and all the things that I mentioned, then it causes eutrophication. And eutrophication in the water is where there's oxygen depleted water. It's where it depletes the oxygen out of the water, and aquatic life can't live. The algae blooms, gets these out of control blooms and just kills everything. And the waterways going out from poultry facilities are notorious for having horrible dead zones. That's what they call them, these dead zones, where it's just the water eutrophication is just horrible. So, you know, this is a huge issue. So there's certainly not the environmental option, you know, chicken meat or eggs. And there's other issues as well, but just time-wise, I'm gonna just go with that one. Okay, I'm gonna wrap up here. What else I wanna say? We're probably, where are we at with time? I'll just take a check.
We're around 35 minutes, but
I thought, okay, all right, I will wrap it up. Okay. No problem. Hang on. Give me just a few more minutes. So I do want to just end with this wonderful another study that I feel was so important and did not get enough airtime or attention. And that is, this was back in 2017. The Alliance of World Scientists, 15,000 scientists are in this alliance from 184 countries. And how they do this, this program is that they'll ask the scientists some important question of the day, give them an amount of time to come up with an answer, and then they compile it all and decide, you know, what is the best answer for this question. The question that they gave them in 2017 was, what is the thing that a person can do individually to curb their own climate footprint? What's the best thing that someone individually can do for climate change? Well, they didn't say buy an electric car. They didn't say get solar panels. They didn't say buy grass-fed beef or local eggs. They said the most powerful impact, the thing that would be the most effective for personal action, is to avoid all animal products. They didn't even say reduce, they said avoid all animal products. It's just so amazing. So there's some backing for our message right there. So I know that this is an activist-oriented group, so I'm just going to give a few last ideas or things for some further actions or things you might be able to do. One is the PlantBased Treaty, and this is a wonderful thing that I support very much. I'm not really involved. I'm just kind of, you know, giving them a shout out. It's something that they're encouraging people to take to your local government. So your local city council, county body, whatever you have, to ask them to adopt this plant-based treaty. And it helps them with their, you know, their climate policies that they need to come up with, right? It gives them something they can latch onto. And it's pretty powerful. I can't remember the details of what it does, but of course it encourages plant-based eating, probably, I think, in schools and, you know, institutions, things like that, as well as other things. So yeah, plant-based treaty is a good one. And also, I have a project called the Humane Hoax Project, and we do 2 webinars a month, God, not a month, Lord, a year. A year, I could not handle that. But we're hoping to do another one, maybe bump it up to 3. But we have the Humane Hoax Online Conference coming up at the end of February. I'd love everyone to come. It's a not day long, but it's about 5-6 hours. We have 5 speakers. that are going to delve deep into the humane hoax. It's going to be mostly about humane washing instead of the greenwashing, but there'll be a little bit of the greenwashing as well. So please check that out. We don't have our registration link just yet. We should have it by the end of this month. And then also, I encourage you to check out my podcast, the Hope for the Animals podcast. We're on a little bit of a sabbatical. I took January off to just kind of take a breath, but I'm going to be back in action February 1st with a new podcast coming out. So I'm on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those. So check it out. Put me in your listening library. And yeah, encouraging feedback. It was what I did for the pandemic. It was just insane that, you know, I did not realize that most everything I did was in-person events. I was always, you know, tabling at this event and then going to this event to speak. And then I was organizing this event, and they were all in-person events. And that all just like stopped. It was crazy. And I was like, wow, I have to do something. And so I taught myself, completely self-taught, how to do a podcast. YouTube tutorials are awesome. So I hope you enjoy it. And I will wrap up with this quote from my book. I also wrote a book about this subject, The Ultimate Betrayal. And my quote is, "It is not our methods of animal agricultural practices that need to change. It is our unwillingness to let go of animal products and animal farming." That's it.
Wow, Hope, that was just so amazing. And I know it was just the tip of the iceberg. I feel more educated. I mean, that was so factual and so thorough. I feel both educated and very sad also right now for the animals, but that's why we do what we do. And I do want to reiterate that Hope will be back for, it's sort of like part 2 on February 10th.
Humane washing.
For the humane washing, and to talk a little bit more about those particular labels and that aspect of it as well. So we hope people will return and join us. Maybe Trey can post the link to the Facebook event, at least in the chat, so people can go and RSVP there for Hope's second workshop. And also, if you or Trey want to repost your internet information in the chat, that would be fantastic. But we're going to go to questions now. Okay, is that good? So we have a few questions, and I hope we will get more questions as well. So the first question was from Jerry. I hope you understand this question, but it's, what's your take on Point Reyes tule elk versus cattle?
The tule elk, yeah. Actually, I'm very familiar with that issue. It's in my area. That issue is happening at the Point Reyes National Seashore. It's about 3 hours west of me. I'm in Sacramento. And it's a big issue here. A lot of activists, it's a cool issue because it's not cool. You know, the poor tule elk are suffering. I don't mean to say it's a cool issue, but what's cool about it is that the environmental and animal rights communities have really come together on this one. They're both working hand in hand on this one. And it's beautiful to see. It's rare to see. We're often at odds with the environmental community. So it's great that we have an issue that we can work together on. What's going on with the tule elk is that the Point Reyes National Seashore is this beautiful, beautiful national park area where this endangered species, the tule elk, they're a smaller species of elk, have lived for a millennia, you know, and they're of course, like every other wild animal, their number has been dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. And what is there is dairy ranchers. There's numerous dairy ranchers that back in like the 70s or whatever, 80s, made a deal with the government to be able to use this public land. I mean, it's public land, but they've got these contracts where they can use the public land, and basically they're fighting the cows. Not the cows are fighting, but the ranchers are fighting the tule elk for the water, for the grazing, and they keep pushing them out and pushing them out and pushing them out with more and more fencing, giving the dairy cows more room, the tule elk's area shrinking. And there have been tule elk now that get trapped and are unable to get to water and that are dying of dehydration. And there was this massive organized effort to actually bring gallons of water and a trough out to the tule elk to give them water. I mean, that's how desperate the situation is and how horrible the situation is. And you know, the activists fought and fought and fought because there was a renewal of those contracts of those dairy farmers. And I will say also that this is not just your conventional commercial dairy. This is, it's the organic and it's the pasture raised and all those labels, you know. So that's what we're talking about, exactly what my talk was about. But so now the government did renew those contracts. We kind of lost this round of battle, unfortunately, and it's just very frustrating. I think that there's now lawsuits that are coming out to try to get that reversed. But it's so frustrating and sad that this product that's so unnecessary, causes so much suffering to these dairy cows, is so at odds with these beautiful elk and all the other wildlife in that area. It's not just the elk that are suffering. Yeah, it's a sad issue. And I guess I can talk a lot. It's hard for me to do Q&A because I just go off on another presentation, but I'll stop. But did the person want to say anything else, or do you want, I'll let you decide what you want to do.
I think it's pretty, I think it's disgusting that the state parks have allowed this to happen. And we are still, it's an uphill battle. We're taking it back to court again. I live in Chickaluma, so I'm 18 miles away from Point Reyes. It's a pristine area that was meant for the public. And they have these cows that have taken this wonderful grazing land and they've turned it into brown dirt with poo being sprayed over the brown dirt to help irrigate it. Yeah. Or fertilize it, I should say. It's terrible. So there is a YouTube video called The Shame of Point Reyes. Anyone who wants to take a look at it, check it out.
Yeah, wonderful filmmaker, Tony Segal, who did that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you both for covering that. And I know, again, there's so much we can say about that. So Hope, there was another question from Amanda. In conversations with farmers, they say their water impact is less due to green water in the form of creeks and rainwater. How do we approach that? I guess she means in terms of doing, you know, outreach.
I'm not exactly sure what is meant.
Amanda, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, maybe clarify a little the question.
Yeah. So in some of the outreach conversations that I have, some of the farmers that do the grazing of the cows and other animals, they say that their water impact is not as much as, say, we quote it when we're talking about the amount of grain and water that go into the resources for these animals. They say it's less of an impact because, you know, their grazing lot could have a creek running through it. So the cows will use the creek water to drink instead of them,
I get it,
you know, from the resources there, or ponds will be in the thing. So the rainwater fills them up. So when they mean that's the term that they've used is green water. Yeah. But it's like the natural resource water that they're not, it minimizes the regular consumption of the water from humans, I guess. Yeah, but sure. That's their thing on that. If you can just talk on that a little, if you can.
Yeah, what I would say about that is there are numerous things. One is that creek or pond full year round? Probably not. So I'm sure they're having to substitute some kind of water in the drier season, very likely. I doubt that it'll be enough water year round. But possibly part of the year, sure, that's possible. However, when you have grazing animals, and something I didn't mention just because there's so much to it, but another aspect is that it's very, very rare for cows to be fully grass-fed. That's, you know, they're just not able to get enough grass or enough nutrients, again, because of year-round issues. I mean, if it's snow, if it's, you know, winter, they're not going to get enough nutrients. So, so often they are substituted or given grains, given hay, given, you know, feed, and water is used to grow that feed. So there's all these hidden water uses that are still going on with grass-fed animals. And then you've got a problem on the other end of polluting that water. So if you've got cows down in the creek getting their water from that source, well, guess what? Those cows are pooping in the creek. And you've got a concentration of cows pooping in a creek, you're going to have a major pollution issue. And going back to what I was talking about, where nutrients gets built up and you can have eutrophication of the water. So there's a lot of issues there. So on both ends.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for that question, Amanda. That was a great question. And maybe just kind of a quick thing, David was asking, is there a website with links to valid and strong studies that you can share?
What's it called? There's one, okay, so the podcast guest that I had, Dr. Tushar Mehta, he has, it's called, I can't remember, it'll come to me in a minute, but it's something very basic, like plant-based data, I think. That might be it, actually, plant-based data, where he has gathered, he and Nicholas Carter, another activist and professor and academic, have gathered a great deal of information on you know, this issue that I've been talking about, all the environmental impacts. So plant-based data, I believe is what it's called. Someone in the, if somebody could check and maybe put it in the chat, but that's a really good one.
Thank you. Thank you. Someone just put it in the chat.
Great.
So Shreya, you have your hand up. Do you want to ask a question of Hope?
Yes. First off, huge fan of the podcast. I loved the latest episode you did with your husband. It was such a fun listen. And I have to say, your voice is so therapeutic, Hope. I love it so much.
Thank you.
So yeah, my question is, I mean, yeah, we do, you know, there's so much good data here, and, you know, the platform that Nicholas Carter and that they've created for this, you know, just going by the data and having an objective perspective. But sometimes when we do outreach, and I'm sure you can speak to this, that, you know, people are like, you have your views, I have mine. And I'm like, well, facts aren't really up for debate. You know, you can't really have, like, it's a fact, not an opinion. And while in that's, and then when that comes up, it's like, oh, you have your biases, I have mine. And so it's like, how do we get from just preaching to the choir, so to speak, and, you know, just show that this is, we're not saying this because it's a, I mean, yes, we do have some sort of bias, but how do we show that this is, you know, unbiased, objective information? And that's, it's hard. So from your experience, how have you been able to navigate that?
Yeah, wow, it's the 21st century challenge, isn't it? What's a fact? I don't know. Truth, facts, it's all relative, right? Yeah, it's tough. And I think if you are having a conversation with someone that suddenly is, you know, questioning like facts and saying, well, yeah, I got my own sets of facts, or I've got my own truths, or whatever. I think you got to back away from this facts or the science or whatever. Nothing's gonna, you know, I think then you've got to switch gears and appeal to emotion. You know, you got to switch gears and be like, so, wow, so you live in Kentucky, right? Were you affected by those tornadoes? You know, I mean, trying to bring it back to reality, that is something that affects us all, and, you know, and bring it home for them in some way that they can connect to it. We can throw out all the science and studies that you want. But with someone like that, I don't think it's going to do any good. I think that you only really want to use this kind of studies and factual information with people that are, let's just say, open to it, and that are going to be on board and understand and intellectual enough to understand that peer-reviewed science matters. But I don't think that those people that are going to ignore it or fight it, I don't think they're not worth talking to. Again, I think that it's just, you got to switch tactics, just like with anybody. I mean, I often, when I'm talking to people, I'll start asking questions because I want to know where they're at, and if they're suddenly starting to talk about their dog, because they know I'm vegan and they're like, oh, I love my dog, well, then you've got an in with companion animals. Well, wow, how would you feel about, if we were killing and eating dogs, that kind of thing. So find that person's in, and don't try not to what you think would move you might not be what moves them. So I hope that helped. I mean, I think that it is a huge, huge issue, a huge problem. I did a podcast with Andy Tabar of the Bearded Vegans podcast. May it rest in peace. So sad that it ended. But
I love that podcast. And also Andy's very much alive.
Yes, oh right. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean Andy didn't die.
Yeah, they ended the podcast.
The podcast ended.
They're very much
sorry, I hope I didn't sound like no, Andy's there. But Andy and I invited him on my podcast, and we did a whole podcast on social media and it kind of gets into this, but about the best ways to utilize social media and how to talk to different people on social media and stuff. So it kind of gets into this. So that may be a good podcast to listen to. But yeah, it's going to be, it's really, I think the thing that could really destroy us is if we don't have a central basis of truth, of fact, that we all come from the same place, and then we have different opinions about those facts. But if we don't have the same facts, that's shit's, anyway, it's bad, but I don't know what the answer is. But I do have, like I said, suggestions about how we can talk to people. So anyway.
That was a great question, Shreya.
I wish I had a better answer. I don't know.
I thought it was a great answer. I thought it was a great answer. I'm sure she felt that.
Oh, I thought you
said totally. I think if we all had a solid answer, we wouldn't really be having these conversations. So it's always helpful to have different perspectives and different experiences on how they handle these situations. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
So Shamira was asking if you have any thoughts on Biden's plan to subsidize meat and dairy with the $1 billion bailout. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I don't have those specifics. I'm not sure. I don't know where that's at. I could comment, though, on some things that are happening in the legislative arena. And I think that it is, it's something that I think a lot of us as grassroots activists have been very resistant to. It's like, we don't want to get into the government hoopla, But I do feel that it is really, really important at this point to support those organizations that are doing the lobbying. There's the Animal Agriculture Fairness Alliance. They are hiring lobbyists to go in and actually promote plant-based eating to government officials. And the reason this is important is things like, okay, for instance, the Farm Bill is going to be coming up. Now, the Farm Bill is this billions of dollars that goes into the agricultural sector, right? And it comes up for renewal every 4 or 5 years or something. And it's going to be coming up fairly soon, I think in like a couple of years. So things are starting to gear up to that Farm Bill. Where's the money going to go, right? And what's going to happen is they know they need to make changes. They know they need to make, agricultural changes, and that, meat causes greenhouse gases. I mean, they know these things, right? But what's going to happen is that these regenerative animal agriculture people are going to go in there and they're going to be like, hey, give us the money. We need the money for regenerative animal ag. That's what you should get into, right? And it's just, oh my God, things are just going to get worse. You know, so we really need those lobbyists in there telling them, no, plant-based, let's transition these farmers from animals to plant farming. You know, that's where the money should be going, is transitioning to plant farming. And that's, you know, I think just it's a critical component. So I really think it's important to support those lobbying efforts.
Great, you are a wealth of information. Because someone was asking if there's a link for the question that was asked of the world scientists.
The Alliance for World Scientists. I don't have the link on me, but it's the Alliance for World Scientists. It was, the study was in 2017, and I could try to find it later. If you want to email me.
Maybe someone can find it.
Yeah.
People are pretty good at that, so. Any other questions? Does anybody else have any? You want to raise your hand and ask a question live of Hope? We have a little bit more time if there are a couple more questions, or you can put a question in the chat. Someone did ask, who did that cow painting behind you, Hope?
Oh, you know, I don't know. It's a cheapo one. I got it at the thrift store, believe it or not. It's just one of those ones that was probably sold at, you know, some home deco place. I don't know. It's not really a painting. It's just a print thing that I found it at a thrift store. I got lucky and found it at a thrift store.
Hey, Hope, I had a question.
Yeah.
I watched a few things about like nitrosamines, where they have like nitrates that cause cancer, or been proven to cause cancer, but then the industry does these like really underhanded things, like funding scientists to kind of like muddy the waters of the science behind it, where it kind of like gives them enough doubt, kind of like how the smoking industry used to do, like of just not having a clear picture of what the science is. And then I'm sure you're familiar with the Kiss the Ground documentary that is pretty much like the main propaganda documentary around this like regenerative agriculture thing, and how they kind of like used doctored industry funded science to kind of like make the case for that. And then, you know, they weren't using like the same time frame of when methane is like relevant to climate change, and so on and so forth. But basically, like whenever we have these like biased, like convoluted, corrupt studies, how can we like root those things out and actually show what the scientific consensus is, right?
Yeah, it's tough because you're right. You can find a scientific study that says anything. You can find scientific studies that say that climate change isn't real, believe it or not. You can find, you know, anything, that beef's great for you. I mean, there's science out there for everything. So it is frustrating. And man, that Kiss the Ground, I was so disappointed in Woody Harrelson. I was like, Woody, what are you doing? So frustrating. But I will say that, you know, it's something I didn't mention, and I kind of want to say, is that regenerative plant farming does have a lot of promise and is a good solution. So, you know, I want to make that distinction between regenerative animal farming and regenerative plant farming. So if we need to put the emphasis on the regenerative plant farming, and Kiss the Ground had some of that, a lot of that. So, you know, so there's that. But when you lump in the animals, some problems happen. As far as scientific studies, so a couple of things. One is, and I try to do this when I am, you know, doing my talk. I try to use meta-analyses. I try to use big studies like the Alliance for Climate Scientists, you know, that kind of thing, instead of just one-offs. Because one-offs, like I said, can say anything. So it's good to look at meta-analyses. It's good to look at large governmental bodies, even like the EPA. Believe it or not, when you go to the EPA's website, they've got a ton of stuff on how horrible animal products, at least they used to. All the studying that I did was before Trump, and he wiped it all out. But I don't know if Biden's put it back now, but I got a lot of my information from the EPA. So when you're analyzing science, you want to look at, of course, who did the study, you know, how large was it? Who was it funded by? All of that stuff is so important. You know, but it's so hard to relate that in, you know, in a conversation or in a talk or whatever. So, you know, it's tough, but weeding out, definitely using, like I said, meta-analyses, large studies, things from like the, you know, large scientific bodies, that kind of thing, that can really help to weed out those one-offs. But, you know, again, it's a thing where, you know, I'll use a lot of science when I'm talking to a group that I know is intelligent and understands that science is important and can trust me that I've done the research to do good science, you know. But if you're talking to somebody that, you know, that you want to maybe then go more with emotion than science. So it's tough. It's a tough thing. But we do what we can. Mentioning, like I should have, that all the scientific studies that I use are peer reviewed, are from good sources, are not funded by any industries. You know, I should have said that in the beginning, and I used to do that. Now I don't, but I should. So that's always a good thing to do too.
And we have time for one, maybe two more questions, some quick ones. And anybody else want to unmute and ask a question or put it in the chat? Are you too busy chewing on the facts that have been presented? We're feeding on the facts today. Good facts. Anybody else have any questions? Last call for questions. So, okay, well, Hope, do you have any, before I wrap up, I guess, do you have some final words?
I think we've covered a lot. It's been great. Thank you for having me. I really have enjoyed it. And yeah, I hope you, you know, look into the projects I have going on and our Humane Hoax online summit, online conference rather, and my podcast and all of that. And I hope to hear from all of you in some other capacity. And I hope to see you all again when I'm back next month.
Yes. Stay tuned and return and come back. Okay, wonderful. Really, really great. So let me then, you know, announce again the workshops that are coming up through AAM. Hope's workshop is on February 10th, entitled Humane Washing Our Food, Cage-Free, Free-Range, Humane, What the Labels Really Mean. On Thursday, January 27th, we have a workshop on supporting animal rights movement prisoners. On Thursday, February 3rd, we have a workshop on the Iditarod dog sled racing issue that, of course, we're against. On Thursday, February 17th, we have a workshop on establishing an animal rights organization with Alex Hershaft from Farm. Also, I want to make the big announcement and reminder about the AAM Atlanta Assembly. The AAM Atlanta Assembly is an 8-day animal rights event, live event hosted by Animal Activism Mentorship. The assembly will be hosted in Atlanta, Georgia this time around, February 19th through 26th. The goal behind the AAM Atlanta Assembly is to educate aspiring activists on the importance of different forms of activism. Activists of all skill levels will be getting hands-on experience with pressure campaign tactics, as well as outreach, vigils, sanctuary visits, and more. Okay, so we're all gathering and assembling in Atlanta on those dates together. If you want more information on that, you can check our website, you can go to our page, you can get the information in our group and the event. You can search for the event, and maybe Trey will also post that in the chat, or one of our mentors will post the link to the event in our chat. Okay, and so I really want to thank all of you for being here, and thank Hope for your time and wisdom for joining us. Thank you, Trey, for working the technical back end. And if you're interested in becoming a mentor or mentee or want to get more involved, please reach out to any AAM mentor or visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com. So folks, if you want to put your own Instagram handle in the chat for others to share, or if you want to put in the chat what your takeaways are, we'd love to see that. We'd love to see, what did you get from this workshop? What are you going to remember? What do you want to take away from it? What do you want to share with others? Maybe what further information are you looking for from a workshop or from Hope? And we will address that as well, okay? So just want to say goodbye. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.